I knew something wasn't right. I'd been pushing through the fatigue for weeks, telling myself it was just work, or maybe hormones, or maybe just being a woman of a certain age. But when I nearly blacked out at the grocery store, right between the bananas and the almond milk, I couldn't pretend anymore. I felt this sharp wave of nausea, like the floor was tilting beneath me. A kind woman helped me sit down, and I laughed it off like I'd just skipped breakfast. But inside, I was terrified. I booked the doctor's appointment that same afternoon, and you know how it goes. They always start with the basics: blood work, vitals. Then came the scans, the questions, more tests. I could see it in their faces before they even told me. That quiet shift in tone, the two sympathetic eyes. "It's a genetic condition," the doctor finally said. "Chronic, progressive, but manageable if we act now." I nodded like I was hearing the weather report, but inside, I felt the ground fall away. Oddly enough, I didn't panic. I had insurance, a solid plan. I'd been careful for years, tucking money into savings, planning for the what-ifs everyone avoids. I even had a fund specifically for emergencies like this, so I focused on what needed to be done. I signed the papers, agreed to the treatment, and packed a bag for the hospital. And Daniel, my husband, was wonderful at first. He held my hand in the ER, brought me flowers, even posted on Facebook about our strength. I thought, maybe we'll be okay. The hospital became my second home, days blurred into nights under fluorescent lights, the steady hum of machines becoming background music to my new routine. Nurses came and went with soft smiles and gentle hands. I kept a notebook by the bed, scribbling questions, tracking meds, trying to hold on to some sense of control. Every day, I told myself this was temporary, that I'd walk out of there stronger, that Daniel and I would face this like a team. He was still showing up then, at least for the first week. He'd bring those little lemon cookies I liked, fluff my pillows, take selfies with me smiling through the IVs. It felt performative sometimes, like he was trying too hard, but I clung to it. Because who wants to believe that the person they love is only strong when things are easy? I told myself it was just stress. He was scared. We both were. That's what love is supposed to be, right? Showing up when things fall apart? But slowly, things changed. He started coming late, sometimes not at all. And when he did visit, he barely looked at me. He'd sit at the edge of the bed, eyes glued to his phone, sighing like the minutes dragged. The warmth faded from his voice. He snapped over little things, a nurse forgetting his parking validation, the food in my room being cold. One evening, I reached for his hand and he pulled away like I was made of glass. I didn't say anything, but I felt something crack deep inside. I waited until the nurses left for the night, until the hallway lights dimmed and the machines beeped softly in the dark. That's when I finally asked him, quietly, "You're not yourself. What's going on?" He didn't answer right away. He rubbed his temples, exhaled hard, like my question was a burden. Then he looked at me, tired, distant, and said words I'll never forget. I'm scared, Amy. I've worked so hard for everything we have, and now it feels like I'm watching it all disappear into medical bills. It's like you're draining me." I don't remember blinking. I just stared at him, my body frozen, like my heart couldn't decide whether to break or stop beating altogether. I had insurance. I had savings. Every single dollar was covered. He knew that. Or maybe he didn't care to know. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to tell him how cruel it was to say that when I was fighting for my life. But instead, I smiled weakly and whispered, "I'm sorry." Not because I meant it, but because I suddenly understood what I was really dealing with. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there, still and quiet, listening to the soft hiss of the oxygen. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every dinner I cooked, every birthday I planned, every night I waited up while he worked late. And now I was the burden. The woman he once said was his everything had become too expensive to love. And just like that, the fight inside me changed. I was no longer just fighting the illness. I was fighting for something else, something he had no idea I was about to take back. The days turned into weeks, and I stayed in that sterile hospital room longer than anyone expected. My condition was stable, but the treatment plan stretched out like an endless hallway. I tried to stay positive, reading, journaling, even knitting again. The nurses were kind. My cousin Lila started visiting more. But Daniel? He drifted. His absence didn't come all at once. It came in skipped visits, unanswered texts, phone calls that rang until voicemail picked up. When he did show up, it was like sitting with a stranger. He'd walk in, plaster on a smile, and spend more time looking at the TV than looking at me. I tried to make small talk, to bridge whatever distance was growing between us, but he kept snapping over the food, the smell, the sound of the IV machine. I remember once I laughed at something on the hospital show we were watching, and he just sighed and said, "Must be nice to forget where we are." That's when I stopped trying to cheer him up. It wasn't just frustration, it was resentment. He carried it like a coat he didn't know how to take off. I saw it in the way he flinched when the nurse mentioned billing, or how he rolled his eyes when I asked for help adjusting my pillows. And still, I held back. Still tried to give him grace. I told myself, he's scared. This is hard for him too. But deep down, a quiet part of me was whispering, he's already halfway out the door, and I'm still sitting here, hoping he turns around. I waited for a good moment, a calm moment, before bringing it up. He was scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging me when I said, "You're not yourself. What's going on?" My voice cracked halfway through, even though I tried to sound steady. For a second, he didn't move. Then he let out this heavy sigh, like I'd just asked him to carry the weight of the world. He began, staring at the floor. "I'm scared, Amy. I've worked hard for everything I have, and now it feels like I'm watching it all disappear." Then came the words that broke something in me. "It's like you're draining me." That was it. No kindness. No attempt to soften the blow. Just raw, selfish honesty dressed up as vulnerability. I stared at him, trying to process the shift. This wasn't about my health anymore. This was about his fear of losing his money, his comfort, his life. I wanted to scream, to demand how he could reduce me to an inconvenience. But instead, I did what I'd been trained to do for years. I swallowed it. I looked him in the eyes and said, "I'm sorry." Not because I was, but because I knew he needed to hear it to ease whatever guilt he'd carry home that night. He nodded like it solved something, like my apology was an agreement. And then he left. No kiss, no lingering hug, just a rushed goodbye and the soft click of the door. I sat in bed, hands shaking, mind racing. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't staying because he loved me. He was staying out of obligation. And even that was wearing thin. After he left, I stared at the ceiling for hours, barely blinking. The beeping of the monitors, the soft shuffle of nurses outside my door, it all faded into a dull hum. I wasn't sad. Not exactly. It was something heavier, something hollow. Like watching a bridge you spent years building crumble in slow motion and realizing you're the only one still trying to hold the pieces together. I thought about the vacations we took, the plans we made, the vows we exchanged, and I thought, where did he go? It hit me how transactional love can become when tested. When things are good, they adore you. When things fall apart, they weigh the cost of staying. I wasn't his partner anymore. I was an emotional expense, a line item he hadn't budgeted for. And as cruel as it felt, there was clarity in that. Painful clarity. I wasn't going to beg him to love me through this. I wasn't going to perform gratitude for his presence when it was offered like a favor. If I had to fight for my life, I'd do it on my own terms. That night, I opened my notebook again. Not to track medication, but to make a different kind of list. A lawyer to call, accounts to review, quiet steps I could take, unnoticed. If he saw me as a weight pulling him down, fine. Let him believe I was sinking. What he didn't realize was that I was already letting go of the rope and planning exactly where I'd land once I did. I didn't make any announcements, no dramatic declarations, just quiet, careful steps in the shadows of his indifference. First, I called my lawyer, a woman I trusted, discreet and sharp as a blade. We updated my will, adjusted power of attorney. I moved funds into a private account Daniel didn't even know existed. The insurance was already covering everything, every bill, every test, every stay. But I let him keep believing we were drowning. I let him stew in the story he chose to tell himself. At the hospital, I played the part. Weak smiles, grateful eyes. I let him sit beside me and pretend he was doing his best. Every visit became a performance. But behind the scenes, I was packing up my old life piece by piece. Lila, my cousin, my lifeline, started coming by the house under the guise of watering plants. In truth, she was packing my jewelry, my documents, the photo albums I didn't want left behind. Little by little, without a sound, I was disappearing from that house before I ever left the hospital bed. Some days I felt guilty, like I was the one lying, deceiving, hiding things. But then I'd remember the look in his eyes that night, the way he said I was draining him. That was the moment he let go of me. He just didn't realize I noticed. So I gave him what he wanted: distance, space, and the illusion of collapse. Let him believe I was clinging to him in desperation, while in truth, I was building my escape brick by careful brick. I started noticing things I'd ignored before, little cracks that had been there all along. How he never asked real questions about my health, only about timelines and costs. How he avoided the doctor when she tried to explain my treatment. How he'd shift the conversation toward work or bills, or how tired he was from doing everything. I realized I had carried so much of our life that he never even knew how it ran. I had made it all look too easy. And now that I needed care, the illusion had crumbled. The hardest part wasn't the pain or the fear of what the illness could become. It was pretending I still trusted him, looking him in the eye and acting like I still saw a future with him. I hated that I had to lie. But I knew if I showed even a flicker of change, he'd notice. He'd start asking questions. So I kept my mask on, told him I was scared, let him believe he was the only one keeping things together. It was strange, watching him comfort himself with a lie I'd designed. Meanwhile, Lila was a godsend. She handled everything with calm precision, reminding me of the woman I used to be before all this. Every time she came to the hospital, she gave me updates. What she'd packed, where it was stored, what still needed to be handled. She even found me an apartment, quiet, sunny, with space for my books and a kitchen I could actually see myself cooking in again. Every detail felt like a lifeline. I wasn't just leaving a man, I was reclaiming a version of myself he hadn't seen in years. I remember one afternoon, just before a follow-up procedure, Daniel showed up with takeout, my favorite, or so he thought. But the smell made me nauseous. Still, I smiled, took a bite, and told him it was perfect. I studied his face as he talked about refinancing the car, as if that mattered more than the woman hooked up to an IV right in front of him. In that moment, I realized he didn't see me anymore. Not the woman, not the partner, just the problem he couldn't wait to outsource. But I didn't let him see my sadness. Not anymore. I was past that. Now, every thank you was laced with farewell. Every smile, a quiet goodbye. When he left the room that day, I took my phone and called the apartment manager Lila had spoken to. Signed the lease electronically. My hands were shaking, but my heart, steady. It wasn't escape I felt. It was relief. Finally, the decision had a shape, a place, a timeline, and for once, it was mine. There was no satisfaction in the secrecy, only necessity, but I'll admit, there was a strange comfort in watching him underestimate me. Let him think I was broken. Let him keep counting every dollar he thought he was losing. What he didn't know was that I'd already counted everything I'd lost long before this diagnosis. And what I was about to do wasn't revenge. It was a release. For him. For me. For everything we'd pretended was still alive. The day I was discharged, the sky was overcast, but I felt lighter than I had in months. I folded the hospital gown neatly, packed the last of my things, and sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. Daniel walked in holding a crumpled bouquet of gas station flowers, cheap daisies and one wilted rose. His smile was stiff, more habit than affection. "Ready to go home?" he asked, like nothing had changed. Like the months I'd spent alone in that room had meant nothing at all. I stood up slowly, feeling the familiar ache in my bones, but this time it didn't scare me. I looked him in the eyes and said, "Actually, I made other plans." Before he could respond, a car pulled up outside the entrance. Lila stepped out, waved, and opened the trunk where my bags were already packed. His head turned so fast I could almost hear the snap of confusion settling into panic. "What the hell is going on?" he asked, his voice rising, sharp and disbelieving. I didn't flinch. Not this time. I said it clearly, like I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times in my head. "You were afraid of losing your money to my sickness. Don't worry. You won't lose a penny. Just your wife." I walked past him, past the stunned silence, past the years of emotional erosion. Each step toward that car felt like reclaiming oxygen after being underwater too long. I didn't look back, not once. Because going back was never the plan. The ride to my new apartment was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Lila reached over once, squeezed my hand, and didn't say a word. She didn't need to. That silence, soft, steady, safe, meant more than all the empty words I'd heard in that hospital bed. When we pulled up to the building, I exhaled. Not just from relief, but from everything I'd been holding in. The lies, the waiting, the fear. I was done performing gratitude for a man who made my illness about himself. Inside, the apartment smelled like fresh paint and clean wood floors. Sunlight spilled through the windows like it had been waiting just for me. Lila helped me carry the bags up. Essentials only, the rest could come later. I sat down on the edge of my new bed, shoes still on, and let the weight of it all settle in. Not grief, not regret, just release. The kind that only comes when you finally stop apologizing for surviving. My phone lit up with missed calls and texts, his name again and again, piling up like debris from a storm. But I didn't open a single one. I didn't owe him that. He had made it clear. He couldn't handle loving me through anything hard, so I gave him the freedom he craved. He just didn't realize the price of that freedom was me. Not the sick version he resented, but the whole woman he stopped seeing long before the diagnosis. That first night alone felt strange, but not in the way I expected. There was no echo of loneliness, no ache for his voice or presence. Just the stillness of a place untouched by judgment or resentment. I unpacked slowly, placing books on the shelf, folding sweaters into drawers, setting a photo of my mother on the bedside table. Each act was small, but sacred. I wasn't just filling a space, I was reclaiming it, making it mine. No apologies, no compromise. I heated a bowl of soup, curled up in a chair by the window, and watched the city breathe. I didn't cry. I thought I might. But instead, I smiled. Softly, almost without realizing it. Because for the first time in a long while, I felt safe. Not because someone was there to protect me, but because I had finally chosen to protect myself. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you stop begging to be chosen, when you start choosing you. Somewhere in the distance, my phone buzzed again. I silenced it without a second thought. Whatever he had to say, it no longer mattered. He had made his choice. And now I had made mine. I wasn't running away from the pain. I was walking straight through it. And on the other side, I was building something new, quietly, deliberately, and this time, without anyone asking me to shrink in order to stay. The messages kept coming for days, voicemails that started angry, then turned panicked, then finally just quiet. I didn't listen to all of them. I didn't need to. I knew that voice by heart, knew every shade of it. But now it held no power over me. Daniel was searching for the version of me he thought would always be waiting. The woman who forgave too quickly, who made excuses for his coldness, who mistook silence for strength. That woman was gone. Eventually, he got what he really wanted, a lawyer. Mine contacted his with the first round of divorce papers. No warning, no conversation, just the facts, signed and sealed. I heard he didn't take it well. He asked mutual friends if I was serious. One of them told him I had planned it while I was still in the hospital. That part apparently rattled him. Good. Let it. Let him sit with the realization that while he was calculating financial loss, I was calculating freedom. What he didn't know, what truly stunned him, was learning I had private insurance all along. That the savings account he'd assumed had vanished was untouched. He had built a whole narrative around being the victim of my illness. And now, the truth undercut all of it. There were no bills draining his life, just his own emotional cowardice. He thought he'd lost money. But what he lost was so much harder to replace. Someone who had loved him even when he was impossible to love. He tried reaching out one last time, a long email, full of half apologies and confused justifications. I didn't know how to handle it, he wrote. I felt helpless. And maybe that was true. But helplessness isn't cruelty. Helplessness doesn't look like abandonment. I read it twice, then deleted it. No reply. Not because I was angry, but because I no longer needed his validation. What I needed now was space. Air. A life without someone measuring my worth and how little I needed. Meanwhile, my world began to shift, gently, back into color. My strength returned, slowly but surely. Some days I could walk farther, stand longer, breathe deeper. I started cooking again, small meals at first, then full dinners like I used to love. I met Lila for coffee on Saturdays, walked around antique shops, bought flowers just because. And I laughed, not because someone told a joke, but because it felt good. I was healing in more ways than one. The people who stood by me, Lila, the nurses, even a neighbor who checked in now and then, became my new foundation. None of them asked me to be less. None of them kept score. And in their quiet support, I found something Daniel never gave me: safety without conditions. I wasn't someone's responsibility. I wasn't draining anyone. I was simply allowed to be. And that, after everything, felt like the most radical kind of love I'd ever known. One evening, as the sun dipped low through my apartment windows, I sat with my journal open, pen resting between my fingers. I hadn't written much in the past few weeks, too busy living, I suppose. But that night I felt the words rise up from somewhere deep. I wrote slowly, deliberately, like each sentence was a stone laid in the foundation of something new. He wanted to protect his wealth more than me. So I gave him what he wanted, and took back what he didn't deserve. There was no bitterness in it, just clarity, a clean final breath after holding it for too long. I closed the journal and looked around at the life I'd built. Not extravagant, not flashy, but mine. Every book on the shelf, every photo on the wall, every mug in the kitchen, it all reflected the woman I'd fought to remember, the one who no longer confused survival with silence. The one who no longer stayed just to prove she could endure. Daniel might never understand what he truly lost, but that was no longer my burden to carry. I had nothing to prove, no one to convince. I had walked through illness, through betrayal, through abandonment, and I had come out not smaller, but more whole. And as I turned off the light and slipped into bed, heart calm, breath steady, I realized sometimes the greatest love story is the one you write with yourself, when you finally stop asking to be chosen and choose you instead.